Perfect. We are live. So happy to be here. Alchemist Wealth Money Talks. We are talking about elevating impact, strategic giving with my friend and the illustrious Mark Greer II. And so, what brings us to this conversation really is that we have conversations with clients about how do we give? What does it look like? How do I make sure I make impact in the world with my money? And I don't think there'd be anybody more qualified to have that conversation with us than you, Mark. So welcome.
Appreciate the invite. Thanks for a chance to connect with y'all.
Great, man. And so just for folks who don't know us, right, and I'll let you give an introduction as well, right? We are, I'm Andrew, my brother Fred. We're partners at Alchemist Wealth. We do financial planning, financial coaching, investment management, retirement planning specifically as well. And we're helping people to make great financial decisions with their money. And so some of those financial decisions are charitable giving or impact pieces of their money. So Fred, I'll kick it over to you.
Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to have this conversation. Don't really know as much about Mark as Andrew does. But yeah, excited to dig into the topic and kind of talk through how you approach philanthropy and the goal and the strategy when you're working with some of your clients. So, but yeah, go ahead. Feel free to go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and then we'll get going.
Yeah, absolutely. So hey everyone, my name is Mark Greer. I am a philanthropic advisor. I founded an organization called Lift As We Climb Impact Advising. I'll talk a little bit more about why impact versus philanthropy. But just really got into this work growing up in Detroit. You saw the issues that affected our community, the Black community specifically, and just always been about social impact. How do we give back? How do we lift our own communities up? And also, help institutions, do better in the way that they treat us. And so I, started Lift As We Climb, really to think about people. I've been in philanthropy for, over a decade now, working at the traditional institution of philanthropy, some corporate foundations, and I currently run a social justice fund here in Detroit that operates a little more, equitably. Right. But I think, the biggest thing is that I see is that there are people like us, like, some of your clients who, are growing their wealth. Right. They're not Bill Gates. They're not, Warren Buffett yet. Right. But they, have a passion for, giving back. They have a passion for, their own economic success and they don't want to wait until they're older, until they pass on to give. And so that's where, I come in to help people think about their legacy, think about how they want to give strategically, and align their values with their wealth plan.
Yeah. So can you share a little bit about your journey? I know you hinted on it a little bit in the intro, but just share your journey, how you got to where you are, where you started, just what made you go this direction.
Yeah, so I actually started out my career as a community organizer. At first at the University of Michigan, where I did my political science and Afro-American African Studies degree. This is Obama's first term, right? I had failed chemistry 101, and so like the pre-med route really wasn't the route that I was going to go anymore. But I always had a passion again for how do we think about policy? How do we lift our communities up? And so, had a class my junior year focused on community organizing and just really got into the work, did that work professionally after undergrad for a few years around issues around economic justice, public safety, environmental justice, like you name it, voting rights and access. Like we were doing it. I got burnt out, to be honest with you. You kind of come out of school a little arrogant. I can solve these problems. We can do it. And, it was getting paid minimum wage basically to do it. Right. And that's social impact work. That's nonprofit work. But I had a mentor who's like, hey, look, if you're going to go back to business, if you're going back to grad school, you should do business and be able to understand the political, social, and pair it with the economic. And that's where the real kind of systems change is, the economic piece. So I did that. I went to Wayne State, got a chance to just really focus on the intersection between, again, the social piece that I had already understood and learn like business, learn finance, accounting, economics, right? And got into corporate responsibility, had an internship at JP Morgan Chase Foundation with their $100 million, at the time, $100 million commitment to Detroit, and really just fell in love with this idea that, we can have economic success. We can really shift and be intentional about how we invest, back into our communities. The bank was able to do it decently, and from there went to Kresge Foundation, which is a private institution, PwC, the accounting firm, and now the role that I'm in that with Transforming Power Fund that invests in community organizing in Detroit. But all through that, I was actually inspired to start Lift as We Climb, because I think that the institutions do okay and they have great people working within them. But I think there's a gap between helping our generation, helping our community be strategic with our giving and kind of get out of this. Choosing my words carefully. I'm just be real because this is the conversation, right? I think for Black folk, right? We have a way of thinking like we can give this. We'll do a book bag drive, right? And book bag drives are great. Coat drives are great, but we're like, where do we get to a point where why can't parents afford book bags for their kids? Why can't they afford kids for their kids? Why can't afford coats for the kids every year? Like, let's think about these systemic issues and how do we, we can give book bags in the meantime while also addressing the underlying social and economic reasons why those gaps exist. And that's where I come in to help people think deeper about their giving, to strategize, beyond, kind of like a basic understanding. I think people are good at what they do, whatever they do to make money. My role, what I do to make money is, think about these social, issues every day on the day. How can we bridge that gap?
Wow. So more, not so much symptoms of the system, but the system itself, and really working into that. And so is that the core focus of Lift as We Climb? And yeah, give me core focus and mission of Lift as We Climb. Yeah.
So Lift as We Climb, was inspired, by my desire to make philanthropy more accessible to everyone. Not just you don't have to be ultra wealthy to be in philanthropy. And the mission is to, the idea of Lifting as We Climb comes from Mary Church Terrell, when she was saying we, as we're climbing this kind of ladder from an economic and social piece, we have the opportunity to lift our community up at the same time. We don't have to wait until we've made it to give back, right? And so that's the basic premise. And I think that the climbing piece is as we're growing our wealth and our wealth, our access, our influence, we can be giving now. And whether it's I joke, whether it's $5 or $5 million, whether you don't have money to give, you just have time to give. Now's the good time to give. And so helping, the core mission is, to help people do that, to tap into their purpose. I talk about impact advising as opposed to philanthropy because people have a misconception that philanthropy is just money, right? Philanthropy is just something that you do when you're older. It's how are we impacting, the community around us, communities that we care about, here and abroad, intentionally, and doing that with our time, talent, and treasure.
And so how do you approach, and that's a good point, philanthropy not being just money. How do you approach that when you're working with individuals and organizations? Do you work with organizations?
Yes. Yeah. I work with organizations, but primarily individuals and families.
So when you're working with individuals, how do you approach that? I guess creating the strategy one, and then is there a part of it that is not just money when you're working through creating the strategies? How does that all play together?
Absolutely. So the work when I first engage in onboarding a client, it really, similar to your work, it starts with deep listening, right? I'm going in and I'm saying, okay, let's do a one-on-one. Who are you? Where do you come from? Just like we did in the beginning of this, what issues do you care about? right? I actually have a worksheet that, goes through all this. What are the issues? Name 5 issues that you care about. A lot of times people say education, economics, the environment, just general. Okay, let's take education. What about education do you care about, right? Is it education? For me, it's, education. I'll get like 5 layers now. It's education for Black boys in Detroit, right? And like be able to get as granular as possible. Okay, what work are you already funding organizations? With that in mind, are you volunteering with those type of organizations? Do you work for, does your place in employment support? Like, what are some avenues that we can do to say, okay, if that's the specific thing that you care about, let's go deep. Let's, if you don't, my next step is to find organizations that align with your vision and values, right? And then the next piece is working with your wealth manager, your financial advisor to say, okay, if it's money that you want to do, how much can this person afford to give? I don't want to take money out of your mouth, right, to give to, these organizations, and then you don't have money to give down the road. Like, how do you sustainably give? How do you take advantage of the tax incentives that, are available for donors? Maximizing that piece. And again, that's where the working with the financial planner piece comes in. And then ultimately it's about getting that money to organizations that you care about, while also making sure that you feel the purpose, right, of your giving, that you feel fulfilled with the way that you're showing up in community. And that, to your point, part of that is financial. Some of that is, the volunteering piece. Some of it, is not even like, okay, I might not have time to volunteer, I'm on a grind, but I know somebody that can help that organization, right? I know another accountant that can look at their books. I know somebody that should serve on their board because of their connections, right? And so thinking about all the different ways that you can engage. And then finally, I'd like to add increasingly, because it's an election year, more clients are looking at how do they engage in, like, volunteering for political campaigns, giving to political campaigns. Giving to political campaigns aren't tax deductible, but that's still a part of, a holistic, vision for impact. And so it all starts from listening, and then from there, being able to take a client wherever they want to go, and finding the right opportunities for them to give, to volunteer, what have you.
Wow. And you mentioned that you use impact because there's misconceptions about philanthropy. What are some misconceptions that you see around philanthropy, and how do you address those?
Yeah. I mean, I think the number one, misconception is that you have to be ultra wealthy, right? That you had to have, millions, billions of dollars, in the bank. You have to have this big name, or that you do it to get a big name, right? For generations, particularly for people of color, for Black folks, we've been philanthropists. We've been taking care of ourselves and our communities for centuries, right? We've made, they say, made things out of nothing, right? We've taken care of family. That's philanthropy. Just because, the IRS doesn't let you deduct, that from your taxes doesn't mean that that's not philanthropy. And so a part of it is redefining what that philanthropy means and who is a philanthropist. I think we all are. It's a matter of how do we tap into, that piece of our life, and for our community, talk about it more. We have the other misconception is that, I think there's, in the Bible, it talks about not, blowing your horn, paraphrasing, right? Not blowing your horn, right? And like being vocal about your giving. That was a very specific instance that he was talking, the guy was talking to, if that's where my faith lies. But there is a piece where we do need to talk about, strategically, how are we supporting our communities in a way that's intentional, that's strategic, that gets us beyond this kind of surface level dollar. Because if nobody's talking about how we're supporting, there's we're seeing numbers that giving is declining for this next generation, because the previous generation didn't pass down the lessons of, like, this is how we move. We might not tell everybody our business, but we know that our church, our social organization, our fraternities, sororities, moving this way when it comes to giving it. So getting an opportunity to be vocal, and strategic, I think, is another place. And that, philanthropy, the last thing I'll say, philanthropy is kind of this like soft thing that you do that, isn't data informed. Like, and I bring up strategy a lot because, we use that in our business lives. We might use that in our personal finances. There's opportunities to, be strategic, with your giving. That's not just a like hugging trees kind of way. Like, no, like they're like, these issues are like really tough multi-generational issues, and they deserve, the attention, our full attention, on that.
I think it's a big area of opportunity to express, because in our community, there's a lot of people that do help family, either with money, or time, or just in many different facets. Like a big area of opportunity to communicate, like, hey, that's philanthropy. Because especially with a lot of clients we work with, they have money set aside for today and for tomorrow for, it could be parents, it could be cousins, it could be siblings. And I think being able to communicate that is pretty big to me, thinking through how you expressed it.
For sure.
I agree. And for Fred, it's interesting because I recently did an event with Chris Beck down in Atlanta and around sickle cell, and he gave me a gift bag. Shout out to Chris. It was one of the best swag bags I've received. But in it was the book Gospel of Giving about Madam C.J. Walker.
Yeah.
And the premise of it, and I'm about 50 pages in, but the premise of it is redefining philanthropy and how the story of Madam C.J. Walker's giving at every level is the spirit of philanthropy, and it's not talked about, and it's not as widespread as the Bezos. Back to her day, the Carnegies and the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilt, right? But from a washerwoman all the way up to the first Black woman, first self-made millionaire in American history, but that she was giving at every level and not just giving money, right? Giving her time and her treasure and her community, and her spirit lives through all the areas of philanthropy. So that I was listening to you say that, thinking that's really hitting home for me now. Yeah,
no, I'm glad you brought up Madam C.J. Walker and Dr. Freeman's book.
Yes,
shout out to him, and I think that just reading that, like, she's one of like the examples of like ultimate philanthropy. Like you said, she was giving at every level, intentionally. And Kellogg Foundation did a study a few years ago that talks about Black people actually give a greater proportion of our wealth, of our income, than any other community in the world, right? And so we and that's just the tax deductible piece. That doesn't count, like Fred said, the ways that we show up for family. And think about this, now we're thinking about how there's academic experience, there's your work experience, but the lived experience, the lived expertise that each of us has to be able to solve these issues, right? How many of us, not to get like that, but like how many of us have helped contributed to a bail fund for a family member, right? How does that translate into focusing on the criminal justice system, right? We have people who've been wrongly convicted. We have people who can't afford bail because of the economic system. Like, think about the expertise that our community can bring to actually solving that issue if we put our heads together, as well as our finances, as well as our time, right? Housing, like all of these different issues, like we're able to speak eloquently about. Because of the experiences that we've had, that our family has had, that friends and people in our community. Let's get to work and start addressing those things.
And thinking through, because you spoke to a few different areas, contributing to a bail fund, housing, just different levels of impact in general. How do you measure impact when you're working with clients and you're coming up with the strategies? Like how do you go about?
So in going back through the deep listening. So, as I'm listening, as we're, looking at, the worksheets that, I have available, we source, what is important to you, right? And, what is your learning style? What are the things? I have clients who are really data driven that want the quantitative piece, like what are the numbers? How many people, is this organization serving? How many people are they feeding? How, that sort of thing. I also have people who are qualitative, who are like, look, the numbers are great, but some of the social issues don't necessarily bode well with the numbers. So, for example, if you're focused on policy change, of course, there's the numbers. Okay, if this policy is changed, how many people in this community will be affected, right? But more importantly, for that type of work, is what relationships are built between the organizations doing the shifting the policy. How are they reaching? How are they connected to the politician, right? The group that's advocating for this social change. Like that's a qualitative thing that's hard to kind of put into numbers, but you can actually report on and say, okay, these groups are working together. Your money has helped them, meet at this location, or to have a building to do, do that type of work, or to take, bus groups down Capitol Hill to make that happen, right? Like being able to have the metrics be highly specific to what the client is particularly interested in, but also what the organization is actually reporting on, because we can bring our perspective and what we think is important, but ultimately the work is being done by a nonprofit who don't have time to answer my highly specific questions, right? Or like, hey, I know you're doing this, but I really want you to report on this. Like that's not always the best way to approach it. And so what I like to do is actually, okay, you're interested in this organization. Let's go to them and say, hey, what are the things what's your impact? What are the things that you're already reporting on for maybe another donor or maybe another foundation? Just give us those metrics, right? Those are things that oftentimes are better than what the questions that we would have asked. Anyway. And so being able to do that, and sometimes it might be an organization that's not as advanced or as developed that has those metrics, working with them because of my background in philanthropy, working with them to help shape what those metrics could look like based off of what the particular donor is interested in, but also what other donors might look for with that particular issue.
Asking the organizations who have their boots on the ground what impact looks like. That's interesting concept. That's a very interesting concept.
I mean, just because I made my money and I'm not picking on y'all in finance doesn't mean I know what's going on in the environment, right? Like we're smart in the things that we're smart about. Let the ordinary people on the ground be smart in what they're smart about, right? And they're the experts, in the issues, and we're able to support their work.
You're not picking on me. I don't know nothing about the environment.
Right. But you have donors. Misconceptions. You have donors who show up and like, listen, I'm the smartest guy in the room. Like, I'm gonna tell y'all what to do, right? If I try doing this, doing that, and that's not the way to approach the work.
They show up in our room like that too, right? And it's we could talk about the donor success and feeling like it should translate, right? Like I've built this business, or I've done this in this area, so therefore I know I'm an expert at anything, right? And so I do want to shift just a little bit, because there was a recent study from wealthmanagement.com, and it talked about that 87% of clients, investors, say that charitable impact is really important. They also, in that same study, only 6% of clients say that they have charitable giving, that they have impact conversations with their financial advisor. What should someone in an advisor relationship that doesn't feel like they're getting this part of service, how could they have that conversation? What should they be looking for? What could they do?
Yeah, I think a part of it is bringing it up. Ideally, you've built a relationship with your advisor to say like, hey, this is something that's important to me. Charitable giving, philanthropic planning is a priority. How can you help, or can you introduce me to someone who would help? Right. I think just starting that conversation, the advisors that I've been talking to sometimes don't want to broach the conversation because because they feel like philanthropy is personal and, they'll bring it up. But the client is looking for the advisor to bring it up. So somebody has to bring it up, right? And so I say to clients, bring it up with your advisor. I say to advisors, hey, don't be afraid to ask, the question, how are you thinking about giving? Are you already giving, right? And oftentimes, that from a business standpoint, that builds a connection between the advisor and the client, that like, hey, this person actually cares about me beyond just like the finances that they're managing. Two, for wealthier clients, there's other studies that are showing that when that conversation is had, the advisor actually has access to more of the client's wealth, right? That they may not have already been aware of before, and they might have an opportunity to manage, through different charitable tools that we can talk about. And so it's a win-win to just have the conversation. And for advisors who say, hey, look, that's not my expertise, it's okay to say, let's find a philanthropic advisor. And of course, Lift as We Climb is here to work with your advisor, work with you to help your clients navigate that conversation. And there are other philanthropic advisors across the country that specialize in a region or specialize in a particular issue that you can care about. Like there's enough resources, enough money to go around to be able to collaborate, find opportunities to collaborate, to make sure your clients have the best experience.
So one piece of advice: if you're a client, bring it up to your advisor. If you're an advisor, bring it up to your client. But what other advice would you give for new donors that are looking to make impact?
Yeah. I think that we have to take time to step back and reflect on what's important to us. I think a lot of us, inherently know, but when you really take a step back, and with my clients, I have a worksheet that takes you through, what are identifying the causes that you're passionate about, and then, going from there, like the example that I shared. Take time to educate yourself on, what's going on. I like to start in my own backyard, right? Detroit is home. I always want to, continue to get in Detroit. But having grown up there, I don't know everything that's going on, right? Life happens. I'm deep into my work. You need to continue to be willing to learn, willing to listen, and have those conversations, whether the current challenges. And then, embracing a strategic approach, to giving. Don't just think about the immediate impact, of a donation, but think about what are the systemic, systemic change opportunities that can happen long term, and how can you, your family, your network be involved in that?
Yeah, we do have a question in the chat around with your focus being on impact. Do you ever steer clients away from donor advised funds or places that? Yeah, just what's been your experience with impact and giving out of donor advised funds or organizations that may warehouse money?
For sure. So this is, thank you, Matthew, for the question. And this is Mark Greer, Lift as We Climb, speaking from my perspective, right? And so with donor advised funds, is a charitable tool. It's essentially a charitable bank account, right? You can put money into a donor advised fund over time. You can put it immediately and you get the immediate tax break. But there's no regulation right now where you have to give that money out immediately. And so what Matthew means by kind of wealth warehouses is that there are, some donors who are just parking the money away, getting the immediate tax break, and just let that money sit and grow and invest. And as of right now, that's their right. My personal belief on donor advised funds is that money should not just sit there. People are hurting now. People are in some of these cases, people are dying now, and that money should be going to work. And so, my perspective is that when I work with donors and clients who have donor advised funds or want to establish donor advised funds, you should self-regulate and make sure that money gets out the door in a 2 to 3 year period, right? If you continue to put money in, but don't just my perspective is controversial in some spaces. That's why I'm kind of talking. But my perspective is don't let that money, don't hoard that money and wait until you pass on, or wait until some big crisis event. That crisis could have been averted if you were giving now. You get the tax break immediately, so that piece is already there. At the same time, the flip side of that is some people will say, well, I want to be able to make a bigger gift later, and so I'm going to put $20,000 down here, and when it gets to $100,000, I'll make $100,000 gift. Okay, and that I'm telling you, as somebody that has run nonprofit, I'd rather have that $20,000 now and be able to do that work than to say $100,000 5 years from now when inflation really makes that $90,000 gift or $85,000 gift. So there's different complexities, but I hope these are the conversations and complexities that we have with clients, and that, again, I work with financial advisors to say, okay, what is best for that client? What is their preference? I'm going to be raw and real about my perspective, but ultimately, it's not my money; it's your money, to work and navigate with and give. And so, hopefully, that answers the question.
I think it did, and it reminds me of our conversation we have with clients. We talk about money scripts, and one of those things is money vigilance, and it can be hard to let go of the money as just a trait. And so we a lot of times like to ask, what's the money for?
Yes.
Right. If the money is for charity, let's give it to a charity, right? If the money's for retirement, and we see this with retirees, if the money's for retirement and you're now in retirement, the money's for now. So even though it might be emotionally or psychologically sad to see the money go down, we save the money for this moment. And same thing with philanthropy or wherever we designate those dollars. And jumping in, just thinking about, so we talked about new donors. We also do retirement planning for clients. And a lot of times when we run the numbers, just like what's the money for, when we run the numbers, we see excess, right? That you can live your desired lifestyle to your desired life expectancy with money left over. Even if we build in legacy to give to the kids, what you would like to give to your children, grandchildren, there's more money. So how do you start having that conversation with folks, maybe surprisingly, who find themselves with an opportunity to be generous? What are some things they should consider as they think about long-term impact at this stage in life?
Absolutely. I mean, first off, just want to, shout out, you and Fred for, the work that Alchemist Wealth is doing, right? That piece is important. That taking care of home, establishing your legacy, make sure that your family is straight, is ultimately important. And I love this question on what's the money for, right? And then you have excess, and along the way, you're putting aside money for charity. I think that's also a good practice. Like, you already know that you're charitably minded, you're giving now and you're giving in retirement. Just, again, being intentional about the gift, being thoughtful, working with your wealth advisor, working with a philanthropic advisor to see what that looks like. I know clients who are, again, giving along the way. I know clients who would say, once I sell my business, I'm going to have a ton of money left over. I want a portion of that to go into a charitable lead trust, which is a tool that allows you to give ahead of time, and then get some of that money back. Like, there's tons of ways to do it. It's finding the right tool that works for you, which again involves working with your advisors to educate on the way that you want to show up, right? And then there are donors who will say, "Hey, listen, I have a plan for when I pass. All of my money is going to this university or this charity." It's all based off of what do you want your legacy to be? What's the timing? More and more people are saying, like, "Hey, I want to see the impact of my giving while I'm here." And I also think philanthropy is a great way to engage family, to pass on your vision, pass on your the culture and the personality, values of generosity and social responsibility to children and grandchildren. It's a way to get to know grandma and grandpa, right? How they showed up, how they were seen in community. That there's this fear of oh, my kids are going to be spoiled, my grandkids are going to be spoiled because I made this money, they didn't, and they philanthropy is a way to kind of cut some of that, right? And to be able to instill some values in that next generation.
do you facilitate? I mean, we're going to go to kind of next step, but do you facilitate that kind of cross-generational conversation and idea core value building?
Yes. Yeah. Honestly, those are my favorite exercises where I'm getting, couples in, I'm getting, them with their children or with their cousins and grandchildren, friends even, to say, okay, what is this person's legacy? How do you want to build? Sometimes you have like, somebody that gives to this, particular cause, and their children don't really align with that cause. But the values of, say, hard work, or values of education is passed on. And so how do the children now define their own legacy, with their giving that still aligns with the values, from the previous generations, right? And they make it their own. It's like those are really cool conversations, and love facilitating that. I would love to start doing that at family reunions, even like you're all together, like let's talk about where we came from, like what's next, like how do we show up for each other, and how do we show up for community.
You heard it first.
One thing you said, and I thought you were going to say something else. You said people don't want their grandchildren to be spoiled. What I thought you were going to say is that they don't want to be forgotten. So after 3 generations,
yes,
people being forgotten, and philanthropy and giving, or some type of mechanism to not be forgotten, is what I thought. That's where my head went. When you
I mean that's a great point. When you think about some of these the larger like historic like foundations, you think of like Rockefeller, you think about Carnegie, like they have names on buildings, you have all these things, right? But the family, I think, ultimately remembers, and like having that documentation, I think just as a community we need to put some of these things down and talk about our ancestors more, right? And getting to know them. For a lot of us, I think it's a recent phenomenon, really, because everything was kind of oral tradition. Like we didn't have things written down. You had the different ancestry websites that are helping kind of uncover some of that now. Like let's get curious about and go as far back as we can and like figure out stories. I'm starting that process now, talking to great aunts and uncles while they're still here, to say, what did you know about your grandparents, right? And press them, because a lot of, in my family, I'll speak for my family, there was a lot of trauma, down south, right? And so when they came up north, they didn't talk about it. And so like my generation lost a lot of those stories. Start pulling that stuff out so we can have that conversation and embed that. I think, Fred, that's a great idea, to embed that in your philanthropy, right? I know when the bag comes for me, like I know, my grandfather's family is from Mississippi. I'm finding that county in Mississippi, and that's going to be a part of, the charity that I do, right? Is finding how to strategically lift, that community up, as well. And so that legacy piece is important.
Wow.
That's interesting, because I was recently talking with my wife about, similar to what you said, people not sharing, like grandparents, great aunts, or whoever it is, not sharing information with the next generation. But it's information that sometimes the next generation needs to know, and there being some level of discomfort or scared, or just don't want to talk about it. And sometimes it's not even with the next generation. It could be with their own siblings. So like their siblings don't know. So then if my aunt didn't tell my dad something, and then he, like, it's just, and what you said, just not being able to, and not wanting to communicate that, I think it translates to a lot of different things.
Yeah,
so.
I agree. So we got to get the shame or discomfort out of the family story, because the family story is our story. And
For sure.
you heard it from Mark Greer II first. At your next family reunion, getting folks together and having a conversation about impact and what your family's legacy in the future should be, and what that strategy looks like. So, I'm sure people bring you in to maybe facilitate that. Where do people find you, though? If folks want to learn more about your work, learn more about Lift as We Climb, where should they find you?
Absolutely. So you can follow me on LinkedIn, Mark Greer II. Also Lift as We Climb Impact Advising, on LinkedIn. Our website is liftasweclimbimpact.com. On there, you can go to the bottom, contact us to sign up, to say, hey, I'm interested in learning more. And also, I believe in the show notes, I have my Calendly. You can schedule a 30-minute intro call. Just let's talk about what you're interested in, what you're passionate in, how we can potentially work together, how can I work with your advisor. If you're an advisor, again, same thing. How can I work with your clients? And we can really elevate our impact together.
Absolutely. Any upcoming, because I know you talked about the website, but anything upcoming initiatives for you?
Yeah, so I'm starting to put together a master course that'll launch sometime this summer. I think the best way to stay involved with that, go to the website and register as the interested person.
Okay. So who would you say is ideal for schedule a Calendly meeting with me? And then who would you say is ideal for the master course?
Yeah, starting with the master course, it's going to go, it's going to be a sort of philanthropy 101. Like, what are my values? How do I identify cause areas? How do I identify great organizations? And how do I measure impact? And so the master course is really for anybody who wants to get started with their giving process, with their giving journey. And then, getting that, you'll walk away with a comprehensive giving plan that you can, immediately implement. Same thing for advisors. You just want to learn more about charitable giving and how to have that conversation with your client. And then anybody can to do a one-on-one call. How can I, if you're curious about how can I elevate my impact, right? How can I align my values with my wealth plan and the where I want to be in the next couple of decades.
Amazing. Well, we'll put the links in the comments below. And also we have a new guide, 5 simple ways to give to your favorite nonprofit, that we'll link in the notes below. Mark, thank you for being here, man. Thank you for this conversation. It was really, really great.
Thanks for the opportunity to connect.
All right. Catch you later. Till next time.